And we all said 50, 100 megabytes, whatever it was. And then they showed us what can you get for this amount of data in different countries, like India, like African countries, like Latin American countries. And it was very surprising because this was the first time I actually encountered from close the realization that 100 megabytes would buy you a dinner for your entire family. And that many people are in this conflict where they have to pick between dinner or learning something. And that left a very strong impression on me. And so 2 years after, I moved to Kenya with an idea for an app that I was developing during this time with a classmate of mine. And I am here to tell you that everything, all the research you're going to do in the internet about this field is like half right. There's so many things you need to know about this and are not written anywhere. And I want to share my learnings and I want to share my experience about this. And I hope that by the end of this talk, at least a few of you will be tickled in the brain like I was and will go and research this and will be curious and maybe learn something and maybe even do something about this. And first thing we learned today is the world map, geography lesson. So we know this is, here we are around this area, this is Africa, and well, world map. But these are also different variations of the world map. This is XKCD number 977. And the reason you have different projections is that take a sphere, project it into a 2D surface, you're going to lose some information. And the different projections show the different information you choose to lose in each and every one of them. So the easiest way not to have this problem is, of course, go for the Flat Earth Society. You should join them. They have members from all around the globe. So here's an alternative projection. This is called the Gauss-Peters, and it was introduced in the 19th century, about 300 years after the Mercator, which was the first one we saw. And if you look again at this one, this upper part of the world looks kind of different. And Africa has kind of different dimensions. And what is the information that is being preserved in this projection is the correct size of the continents. So this is the true size of Europe, true size of Russia, true size of Africa. Not this. This is the correct shape of the lands. In numbers, if we take the number of people living in Europe and in North America, we get roughly the number of people living in Africa. If we take the area of both continents, we get roughly the area of the African continent. This means Africa is huge. And another interesting fact is this, the languages. While the number of official languages in Africa is not much different from the number of official languages in other continents, the number of languages that is actually being used is way higher. And it's also very different. To those in the back who cannot see and jumping up and down, languages in Africa is ranging between 1,200 to 3,000, while in Europe it's around 200, and in North America it's around 300. Why is it so different? Linguistics are still researching, still did not decide what would be a dialect, what would be a language. So this number is a teaser for the end. Have this in your mind, we're going to go back to this later. Last slide about how large Africa is. You take China, you take Japan, you take India. Then you take United States, including Alaska and Hawaii. You take UK, Eastern Europe, Italy, Germany, France, Japan, Portugal, and you still have space for more. This is how large Africa is. And your takeaway from this slide is that because this continent is so huge, imagine how much hardware would you need to have enough internet? A lot. Lots of internet means it's going to be very expensive, and it means it's going to take lots of time. And that's a problem. I would like to go over with you about a quick history of the internet to find out why. Why is that such a problem? Why is it not the same as in the US or in Europe? What put Africa behind? So we're going to run through a timeline through the last few decades, and we're going to see what went wrong. You ready? I need your attention. 70s. Africa, not much going on. Globally, we have the ARPANET has 70 nodes, which is a US military network. 70 nodes already communicate with each other. 80s. First half of the 80s. First ISP is already being set, and the protocol TCP/IP is being declared. What happens in Africa? The UN sets an organization that is in charge of bringing internet to Africa. Second half of the 80s. The desktop. AOL pops up, while in Africa, first networking system shows up. And 90s, your mom starts yelling at you, get off the internet, I need to make a phone call. What happens in Africa? 18 institutes can communicate with each other. First gap already there. While globally, the World Wide Web shows up. First internet connection shows up in Africa, second half of the 90s. While globally, Hotmail, Google, PayPal, ICANN, the internet becomes more and more characterized. 2000s, first major internet connection to the continent. Globally, Skype, Pirate Bay, you already start exhausting your bandwidth, while in Africa, barely. Second half of 2000s, mobile phones show up, and this time it's not only outside of Africa. Mobile phones also show up in Africa. So Afrinic gets the permission to register African IP addresses. Sorry. Can you close the door, please? Can you close the door? Globally, we get Reddit, we get YouTube, and more exhausting your bandwidth. 2010, 0.4% of the people have high-speed network. Globally, Snapchat, Coursera, it's no longer technological challenges, but more what you do with it, more the idea. So the gap kind of grew larger and larger each decade. Now we're going to run through one more timeline, and this will be the number of users of the internet in each decade. So from the beginning of the 90s, we had a very similar start point. And then the gap started showing 0.4 versus 3.6. And by 2005, while globally celebrated the first billion people connected, in Africa, more than 5% were connected in the sub-Saharan Africa. That's a huge gap. And by this year, you see this is a huge gap. To show you this gap in a different way, let's look at this graph. That's unpleasant to see, and that's kind of not nice. But if I want to make this graph look a bit better, I can add to this the number of mobile subscriptions. And then this gap is way smaller. About 80% of the people in Africa would have a mobile subscription by now, and practically everyone globally. So this is somewhat positive, right? Maybe there's a big gap in the internet connections if you count them, but mobile seems to give us some hope. Mobile first. You probably all heard it if you're developing for something or if you're planning products for something. And what is interesting is that about Africa, you would not say this is really mobile first, but you would say this is pretty much mobile only. Because while everybody do have a phone or a mobile subscription, and this number does grow, the number of people who have a desktop or a laptop is small, and it will not grow. Let's talk about mobile apps. From my research, this is the mobile apps that are most commonly used in Africa. So we have some financial ones and medical ones and educational ones, and this will be commonly used by NGOs, for example. Then you have sharing economy and transportation. For example, Uber is a big deal in Africa, and practically any country has Uber and has local competitors. Weather and agriculture is of course important, given that lots of crops are being grown there. And then entertainment and social media. Everybody have a Twitter account. Everybody in Africa also have a Facebook account. So social media is a big deal there. Religious. That's an interesting app. Many of my friends in Kenya have an app that when you open it, it will chant for you verses from the Bible or from the Quran. That's a new crowd, right? I don't know too many people here or in Europe who would have this. This slide is very cool. I hope you can see it from the back, at least the logos. So this is a chart that shows the Play Store of the US and of Russia, Android and iPhone, and the most downloaded apps in the last week. So if we look at the logos, I hope you can see. I can read out for you. In the US, we have Snapchat, we have Spotify, we have Instagram. All those are fairly data savvy. Then if we look at the Apple Store, YouTube, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, Spotify, fairly what we can expect, right? Not big surprise. What do you people here in Russia download? You like WhatsApp Messenger for Android and Viber and VK. In the iPhone store, you download WhatsApp and Telegram and Instagram and VK. Sounds reasonable, right? This is roughly the apps you'd find on your phone today. If you want to download or check this out yourself, apptrace.com is your address. Super nice, all the countries in the world, completely free. Next slide, I'm going to show you the same for Kenya and Zimbabwe. Take a second to guess what kind of apps you're going to see there. So suggestions were Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp. Before we start, is this the flag of Zimbabwe or of Kenya? All those who think Zimbabwe, raise your hand. All those who think it's Kenya, raise your hand. Okay, third of the crowd raised their hand. What about the other 2/3? What's your guess? Yes, this is Kenya, this is Zimbabwe. Good job for those who guessed. I don't know what to say to those who didn't. Take a chance. So, in Kenya you have Opera Mini, you have WhatsApp, Facebook Lite, updates to WhatsApp, and then this Safaricom, which is very interesting, and we're going to cover it through our presentation. What do people who have an iPhone in Kenya would download? Safaricom, Taxify, which is the competitor of Uber, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, not Facebook Lite. Already interesting, right? Why? Let's look at Zimbabwe. The Android users of Zimbabwe would take Facebook Lite, Instagram, Opera Mini, WhatsApp, Facebook, Messenger, and then iPhone users in Zimbabwe. What do they download? YouTube, Instagram again, WhatsApp, Facebook. Share it. It's also an example we're going to cover. And I want to ask you, how many people do you think who live in Zimbabwe own an iPhone? Giggles from the crowd. Yeah, I guess not that many, right? So while this slide does have accurate data, it may be not a good representation, because what will be the breakdown between Android users and iPhone users in those countries? Would there be even people who use a smartphone and have apps and don't show up not in this and not in this? The answer is yes. Not many people, or not all people, have a Play Store account. When you download an app, you won't necessarily use this. We will cover how you're gonna download your app, though. So, takeaway from this slide, while the information you find in the internet is correct, it's not necessarily representing enough your crowd, your target. Next slide would be the same for Japan and Vietnam. I hope more people from the crowd will be guessing. Japan, right? Good. So, what do people in Vietnam like? Facebook, Facebook Lite, some playing apps, self-hygienic camera. Sounds reasonable. Then again, iPhone users would take Facebook and YouTube and some other data-savvy things that suggest maybe it's more visitors and not necessarily locals who use the iPhone and use the local Play Store. Japan is very interesting because I don't know if you can see, but it's all Japanese, no English here. Cannot read the names. And while this is out of our scope, it's actually also very educational that the market seems to be large enough that the global apps are not even interesting. So if your focus is Asia and not necessarily Africa, take this into account. And let's do some examples of apps in Kenya. So yeah, there's Uber and there's Taxify. They're big competitors. And you can see that when I was searching for Taxify in Google, I found Uber. These things work. And I want to tell you, how does it go when you order a cab in Kenya? So let's start with why would you order a cab? The answer is that the roads are not very meant for walking. Driving is terrifying, not only because they drive in the British side of the road, but also people drive fast and wiggle around the road. And there are matatus, which are these minivans, which is kind of buses, but nobody knows their schedule. Only locals know this. So if you want to go from one place to another that is fairly far, you're going to have to use a cab. So I'm opening my app, and I'm ordering an Uber, and I'm writing my pickup point, and I'm writing my destination, and then the app searches, and it matches me with a driver. Then I get a notification, your driver is on the way, and then I'm getting a phone call. Hello. Hi. I'm your driver. Nice to meet you. Where are you? Well, I am at Fayetteville Estates. Can you see this in the app? Ah, okay, I'm coming. Okay, getting ready, going out of the door, locking the house, I get a notification. Your cab driver is here, and then I'm getting a phone call. Hi, I'm here. Okay, I'm coming out. And then hopping in the car, and the driver marks start the ride, and then he says, okay, where are we going? And I'm like, well, you can see the destination there in the app, right? He's like, ah, okay. And how do I get there? And I'm like, I don't know, you're the local guy. You would know. And then he says, okay, maybe you can navigate me there. I'm like, I really don't know the way how to get there. And then he says, okay, maybe you can open Google Maps. Yes, I can. I don't want to. This is the point of this app, for you to do it. And then you start this negotiation of maybe you can just look and tell me later, or things like even I hold the phone and I tell go left, go right. Because interestingly enough, the blue line on the map does not mean to everyone that this is where you should go. This is trivial for you, this is not trivial for all the drivers in Kenya. And the takeaway from this slide and from this hilarious experience is that not only you need additional 20 minutes when you call a cab in Kenya, but you also need to expect that the usage of your app is going to be completely different from what you think. Yeah. Next example is this app, Share It. Anybody in the crowd recognizes the app? 1, 2, 3, 4. This 5. This app allows you to share files over Bluetooth. And a common way to share apps in Kenya, from what I saw, is sharing the APK over this app. The reason you would do this is you don't have to use data, which means you don't have to go to a place with reception if you don't have one where you live, and you don't have to use your precious data plan. Because imagine that not many places have Wi-Fi. So it means that your data plan is all you have for the month. If you want to download something, you have to fit in your megabytes budget. And when you have around 200 or 300 megabytes a month that you can actually afford, it means around 10 megabytes a day. Let's be honest, 300 megabytes is probably more than what you used since the morning. And when you can share an APK for free, not consuming any megabytes, this is way nicer. The downside of this would be that you don't have a Google Play Store user. Who's going to track you? How are you going to know when your users have a crash? No crash report. How are you going to know what your users do in the app? You don't have analytics. How are you going to know that somebody even downloaded? Where are you going to get correct numbers? It's a big challenge. It's still a question that even people in Google are trying to answer today, because this is easier to use and it works. So try to find a way. Maybe somebody here today will come up with a brilliant next idea. Write it down. Last example is M-Pesa. Anybody in the crowd knows M-Pesa? This is their logo. So the official definition is a mobile phone-based money transfer and financing service. This essentially means that because in many countries in Africa there are no banks, or there are banks but they're few, and getting a bank account and bank credit is incredibly hard, this is your only bank. When you get a salary, you put the money here, or the employer puts your money in your M-Pesa account. If you want to send money to your family in the village, you would send them through this. If you want to pay for a cab or even in the supermarket, you will pay with your M-Pesa. They exist for 10 years and they're doing super well. They have users do transaction about every 3 days. This year, they made revenue of 60 million euros. That's a lot. They have 20 million active monthly users, and they have over 100,000 physical agents, which are those kiosks where you would go to maybe withdraw money, cash, or deposit cash. And this is how the UI of their app looks like. Simple and clear and in English, in case you were wondering. And this is how you would charge your credit, because you cannot get an account where you get every month the same amount, but you have to buy prepaid cards and charge your phone. And they offer a very wide variety of plans. You can buy internet or credit for 3 months, for 1 month, for 1 week, 1 day, or 2 hours, or 1 hour. And the prices, of course, range between a few cents for a few hours to around 30 euros for 30 megabytes that will last you for 3 months. And yeah, you scratch, you get the number, and you put it in your phone. And that's how a physical kiosk of M-Pesa looks like. In the middle of the street, you have this tiny tin kiosk that has those bars, and you come with cash, and you come with your ID, and you always have to have an ID, and then you can get money, or withdraw money, or do other things. And other things that you can do with M-Pesa is buy insurance, buy state bonds, and buy financial instruments. Everything is going on through this bank, and it's all linked to your SIM card. So if you buy a SIM card of this company, Safaricom, you have a built-in SIM app that is called M-Pesa. And it's functioning not only from a smartphone, but even from your basic Nokia. And then you would access the Safaricom menu using your USSD. So you type this combination of stars, and then this thing pop up. And then you type your number, of the scratch card, and then it says how much internet do you want to buy. And then you have this interactive menu that you say 1 is for 1 week, for example, 2 is for 1 day, and this is how you buy your internet, or actually data plan if you have this basic phone, or you can use the app if you have a smartphone. And many people in Kenya have 2 SIM cards, one for Safaricom and one for another mobile provider that has actually cheaper calling tariffs. And you can find M-Pesa not only in kiosks in the middle of the road, but also in large supermarkets that you can buy just in the store, in the cashier when you do the checkout, or even in markets. Even in markets, seriously, you pay with your phone. This is more advanced than most of us. And the takeaway from the M-Pesa story is that you can develop for a completely foreign market that is foreign to you in 2 ways. You can either pick a very specific target group and develop for them, or you can find one service that everybody needs, like M-Pesa, and develop that. Because when you talk about Africa, you can talk about the city with the skyscrapers. You can talk about Siberia, a large slum. You can talk about people who live in houses made of mud. You can talk about kids who study with their iPads. All this is Africa. And pick one, try to do one for everything. It's interesting. And I don't know what's the right answer. I don't think there's a right answer. But M-Pesa can be super inspirational. And of course, there are competitors to M-Pesa, and they do well in some countries. And outside of Africa, you can find M-Pesa in Asia and even in Balkan countries. And so I thought to myself, I'm inspired. I'm going to go to Kenya. That's my target group, right? And I started this company called Konta with my classmate from university. So 3 years after graduation, we officially decided to go for it. And what we decided to do was develop a platform for people to open an online store from this environment that we discussed so far, where you have very limited data and you have a very basic phone. And, you know, Shopify does not even download on most of the apps. It just immediately shows your app is not compatible. And this is a big need there because the way people sell in Kenya, from what I saw, in addition, of course, to traditional stores on the street and malls, is WhatsApp groups. This happens in the way that when you go and buy something from a person, you hear right after, hey, what's your phone number? Let me add you to the WhatsApp group where I'm announcing new things I sell. And then you're a member of 15 different groups. And every day you get notifications. I have new mosquito nets. I brought new bed sheets. I brought new cutlery. And you're like, mute, 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 mute. I don't want to buy mosquito nets that often, even though it is a must in Kenya. So let me tell you how it was. After all the research that I told you about, there was still a lot to learn on the ground. So many things are not documented and I was not prepared of. And things kept going wrong time after time after time after time. And I want to share those with you. This was the design of our app. Seems to be fairly simple. You have your user, you can buy stuff, you can sell stuff, and you can send messages, right? Simple. What could possibly go wrong? First thing that went wrong. Convincing people to give me their precious megabytes was not easy. Even though we did a native app that weighs only 3.3 megabytes, it still people said they cannot afford it, or they finished their data for the month, and I had to open a hotspot to download it for them. Some people who were convinced to download the app just were in a place with such a bad reception that it was stuck on the screen of, hey, I downloaded 8 kilobytes for over a minute. And that sucks. You need to be really motivated to download an app for 15 minutes. Most users will not do it. They don't have the patience. Takeaway? Still trying to find out, but the problem is that you have to be prepared that downloading the app is not simple. Next thing. This device downloaded the app and immediately crashed. I could not see this in my crash report because I don't have their information about this device, and so I don't know what went wrong. This happened many times, and another problem that I had with unidentified devices is that they claim to be offline, even though a second ago we downloaded the app. So, not sure what exactly in the operating system went wrong. And again, I could not have enough crash report information, but this device is called Tango. Sorry, it's called Techno. Anybody heard of this Techno? It's not Samsung, it's not Nokia, it's not iPhone, it's Techno. They're doing so well in Kenya that they have a 10-floor building with glass cover because they're so popular in Kenya. Have I ever heard of this device before? Was I prepared to develop for this device? Things crash. And that don't even behave like they should, and this is a very basic thing. It's just get your online, offline status and display it. Next thing that went wrong. This is the page of an item, and you have name, description, price, amount, and this should be the picture. But because the internet connection is so slow, it timed out. Download image orange has failed, and this looks very ugly. This is not how you want your page to look. So take away from this, try to use less images. So we thought maybe we can put a default image for this to look less ugly. It still looks ugly because almost all the pages only had the default image. Some of the devices had this feature that if the data is too much to download, they will not download it unless specifically requested. And, you know, images are nice and they send the message clearly, but they don't download. Don't use images. Or if you do use images, prepare your UI to be good without images, and only in the end have a feature that it would look good also with, rather than the other way. Text. This is how we plan the app, and you know, this is the store. This is the logo of the store, this is their name, what they sell, and you can manage your stock, and you can show your financial balance. So one of the users of the app was testing this, and I was looking how she interacts with the app to learn. And she's looking at this, and she filled out those two, and then she says, okay, how do I add items? Guys, how do I add items? Why do I have to click here? Manage stock. It's clear to you. It was not clear to her. While this is English, this is an English that is less common there. When I switched to edit items, it was clear. Lesson from this: when you choose to use text over images because it's less consuming data, make sure you pick your words right. And I'm not a native speaker in English, and it's challenging for me, but also friends of mine who are native speakers, it's challenging for them. The good solution here would probably be find somebody local who will help you with the wording. Or symbols. So this is your manage stock page. And then one of the users who was using this asked me, oh, I made a typo, how can I change the name? You tell me, what do I have to click here to change the name of this one, for example? Pencil. No. The user was looking at this and I told her, pencil? She looked back at me surprised. So even the symbols that would make sense to us do not make sense everywhere. And again, you need to find a local person to help you out with this, because this is the only logical thing to do. And to summarize, here are all the takeaways from this experience. Internet is not available everywhere, and it will take lots of time to arrive because Africa is huge. It's not even mobile first, it's practically mobile only. The demand is different from what you think. Remember those religious apps? The use would be different from what you think, like the guy who was calling on Uber all the time. The distribution would be different. Probably not the Play Store, probably not the App Store. The finance is going to be different. If you're going to add an option of paying with PayPal or paying with a credit card or a bank account, people are not going to buy for you simply because they can't. M-Pesa and similar tools is what you need. Variety. Africa is very different, and most of the countries, to be honest, are different. And either pick one that goes for everyone or choose your target group wisely. Data is very scarce. If you have 200 or 300 megabytes a month and you want to use them, you're going to have to offer something really good in return. So make sure that whatever you do is very valuable and not just nice. App Store, not there, or not always there. You need to think of a different way for analytics, for crash reports, and for counting your users. The operating systems, not what you planned for. They're going to behave differently. The devices, not what you planned for. They're going to behave differently from what you know. Images may not load. Language may lead to confusion, and symbols may lead to confusion as well. And after telling you all of this, I hope that this was maybe a little bit scary, but also very interesting. And this will tickle your adventurous side. And that after this, some of you would be like, man, that's interesting, I have this idea, and I want to try to do something cool. And you'll go ahead and do it. And if you decide to do it, this is my Twitter handle. I'm very happy to help and share more of my knowledge. I am very happy to connect you to local friends that I have in Kenya. And I hope you'll go ahead and do it. Thank you.
Natalie, thank you for your speech. I have a question. How many downloads do you have of your application in different stores? And you showed us Android store, no, Google Market, and App Store, but maybe in Kenya there is another store.
There isn't. While in China they have alternative Android stores, in Kenya your store, or in many countries where data is scarce, your store is Bluetooth sharing apps.
Okay, and how many downloads do you have?
Not many. We're still trying to find a smart way to reach the people we want. You know, if we don't want the people who have iPhone. We want the people who have problem selling and have very basic devices. So it's not a good financial group, but it's very challenging.
Okay, and I have an idea. You can put your Android or another device in these kiosks that share your application with ShareIt.
This would be amazing, yeah? They only have to agree to that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for speech. And my name is Pavel. I'm also working in a project which working in Kenya and Nairobi and some other. It's called AgriLedger. It's for agriculture stuff based on blockchain, and I fully understand what you tell. It's a no internet, M-Pesa eats all, and no data. So my questions is a few. First of all, in our application, we not even use text at all. we only use images. For any actions, we only use images because that guy did not understand any text. And why did you don't do that?
How much megabytes is your app?
We trying to keep it under 2.
Under 2 with images.
It's vector images.
That's cool. We did try to use more symbols like that pencil that also weigh not that much, to be something that is general enough and not for, for a specific group. We're still struggling to find what's the right symbol to use. We do agree this is the right direction, but it causes as much confusion as words from our experience.
Got it. And the second thought and question is, did you try something like Wi-Fi router based on sun power? It's one thing which about we are thinking now because it can improve. This cheap method to improve the connectivity and like that. Did you know something about it? No.
Definitely, it's very popular solar energy, and this is completely out of the scope for us as app developers, but we are in touch with companies who do things like that. If it's interesting for you, I'm happy to connect you to the ones I know there. That will be just a larger number of companies you already know there.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah, I have one more question about where you developed this application, on site in Kenya or somewhere in Europe?
Before we developed this in advance, I studied in Israel. My co-founder stayed in Israel, and he developed from there. And we developed it actually in the evenings, in the weekends, while we were still working and saving money to go there.
So how you check your design theories and custom development and surveys and such things, how it conducted?
So we were developing this prior to moving, and then in March I moved there and started working on the ground with users. And then I'm giving feedback from Kenya to Tel Aviv and back.
So thank you.